Thank you for joining. This is Where is my next project coming from? Sales pipeline management for freelancers and small agencies. So if that's not the session you're looking for, you can leave now and we won't hold it against you. Otherwise, you're stuck here till I'm done. All right. Chris O'Donnell. And I spent way too much of my life as the salesperson for like small web shops or small software shops. I built New Year's Eve 1995. I was living up in Woodstock, Georgia. My wife was 7 months pregnant, so we weren't doing anything fun on New Year's Eve. And I found myself up alone at 9 p.m. with a Windows 95 computer, a web browser, and a whole fridge full of homebrew. And decided I was going to learn how to build a web page and get it online in 1995. And I technically did that, although it was about 3 a.m. before I figured out Unix permissions and made the website world readable for anybody else to see it. But I was technically, had a website online in 95, and I turned that night of playing with, HTML1 into a job with a web agency about 3 months later. If you're a long-term Atlanta person, Homecom Communications, way back in like 96. They were right across the street in the three towers there in Buckhead. They went out of business in 98, so anyway, quick commercial break so I can expense report all this. Currently, I'm a digital strategist with ProMetSource. We're a web agency out of Chicago, but basically a virtual company. Digital strategist is basically a sales job. I spend my day talking to both current clients and potential clients, scoping out web projects, writing proposals, building estimates, and all that fun sales stuff. And yes, like everybody else here who's doing a presentation, we're hiring developers, project managers. Feel free to speak to me afterwards if you're looking. Okay, and you guys are. And since we're a small enough group, I think maybe just a quick round of introductions would be useful, starting over here.
Rob Huffstedler, CTO of Mellon Technologies. We're 30 total people right now.
Hey, Logan, I'm working for Turner.
Okay.
Johnny Fox, I'm the former VP of Operations for ProMat. Right now I'm on leave.
Paul McKibben, I am Turbojet Technologies, just me.
Chris Pfeiffer with Attain. We're a 600-person firm, but I have some sales responsibilities that I'm not all that good at.
Okay.
So. Del Gray, a web developer for our university right now.
Okay.
Jake Rockowitz, I'm a consultant, I'm like the web guy.
Okay.
Eric Ratto, I'm with Paramount Software Solutions here in Alfred.
Matt Haggerty, I guess my job title is officially CTO of a small startup that doesn't actually have a name yet.
Okay.
So, cool.
Really
Stealth mode.
Yeah. I'm theoretically here to do recruiting, so
Okay.
I mean, if you're interested in one-off work.
I'm Jim Smith, and I have been working full-time at Oak Ridge National Lab for the last couple of years, and I just cut back on my hours because my wife retired, and so but I'm still there, but I had done some freelance, and I'm kind of thinking about getting back into it.
Okay.
I'm Jared.
Okay. All right. So you got some people in the target market here. All right. Cool. So start off with a quick discussion of marketing versus sales, and does it really matter if you're the CTO or CEO of a small web agency trying to do sales on your other jobs too? Really, it doesn't. I mean, in a big company, in Turner, right, marketing goes and finds people to raise their hand and say, I need help, I want advertising or whatever in their case. And then sales kind of takes it from there and does everything else. Of course, the sales guy would say that, right? We do everything else. But the reality is, if you're a small agency or a freelancer, what sales is to you, you're trying to find people that need what you do and are willing to exchange generally money for your help. Could be other stuff, I guess, if you value something other than money. But really, sort of in a small business type of environment, marketing and sales, it all just sort of melds together into one thing. You're trying to find people to help and then offer to help them. So, since sales funnel is in the title, we'll start with the sales funnel. What is it and why do you care? If you go Google sales funnel and hit the images tab, you get about 10,000 versions of this picture. Every sales consultant has to take it, rename the stuff, add a level, take a level off, so they can claim it's theirs and go on speaking tours. So I mean, basically what the concept is, you've got this universe of people that might buy, web development services from you or graphic design or whatever. And as you sort of work with them, that pool really narrows down until, you have one customer that buys. And so this is pretty typical. of what that might look like. You've got, some kind of initial contact, they hit your web form, they call you, you talk to somebody in the hallway out here, whatever. Then you have to qualify them, confirm that, they actually do need a website and they can afford your rates, and, that, in this case, they don't really want site core, if you're a Drupal developer or whatever, make sure they're a good fit. Then there's some kind of presentation phase where you're going to write a proposal or, go and do a presentation, have a bunch of phone calls and meetings. They evaluate, they come back. So it's 3 and 4, sort of like Agile, right? You'll kind of do a couple of sprints there of 3 and 4. And eventually you'll win or you'll lose. So again, here's someone that turned it into 4 steps. Here's someone turned it into 3 steps. It's all the same thing. It's, kind of narrowing the universe of people till you work with them. All right. But those pictures aren't really useful for anything, because what your sales funnel actually is, it's a spreadsheet, which means we get to do some math. So how are we going to do that? So let's just say you're a small 4-person web shop or something, and you want $500,000 in new revenue next year. Now we're going to ignore the $250,000 you might get from your one existing big client in the real world, and that kind of stuff. We're just going to assume you want $500,000 of money from people you've never talked to before. How are we going to plan for that, and how are we going to do it? Okay. Sales presentation trope number 1. Always quote an old dead guy. So, fail to plan, you plan to fail. You're not going to get that $500,000 if you don't kind of go into it with an idea how you're going to do it. Sales trope number 2 for sales, always quote a current respected business leader. So in this case, we got Warren Buffett making the same point. Something good happened today, it's because somebody thought about it and planned for it sometime in the past. And because as I was looking at this and got feeling a little guilty about the fact that both my quoted people were old white guys, went out and found Estee Lauder, making another interesting point, which is that really, whether you think you're in sales or not, you're in sales. Who's married or otherwise sort of lifetime partnered up? That wasn't a sales job, right? Getting your kid to go to bed on time, eat his Brussels sprouts, negotiating, with the gardener, whatever. Pretty much everything you do in life, even if you don't think you're in sales, you're trying to convince somebody to do something for you. That's kind of what sales is. Just a little more focused in this case because it's one transaction for money. Okay, so when you're setting up a sales funnel, think about kind of how you want to organize it. Simple is better. Less stages is better. I know techie that you might be kind of thinking, I could slice and dice this into 15 steps. Don't do it. You won't be able to track it. You'll hate it. So keep it real simple. You're going to have, again, the first time someone hits your web form, maybe 1 out of 20 of them will ever actually buy something from you. And once you've talked to them and determined they've got money, budget, all that kind of stuff, maybe 1 out of 10 of those. These are actually relatively realistic numbers, by the way, for some of the shops I've worked for in the past. So these are not totally out to lunch percentages of how that might work. And you just kind of, obviously, as people work their way through the funnel, become more and more likely that they'll become customers. So the way this works with some math then is starting with, in this case, we're assuming our average web project's $50,000. So we're going to need 10 to get $500,000 next year. I like to be conservative because in every sales job I've had, at least once every year or so, the VP of marketing of some client will tell me, I'm ready to go, let's get a contract and get working on it. And the guy gets fired the next day. or he quits, gets a better job, and the project dies. So I always like to account for that, basically, and shoot for 1 more than what I really think I need, because that happens. And then, again, I think the math's pretty obvious. So the point here, though, is to end up with 10 sales in this case, you got to have 200 people over the course of the year kind of wave at you and say, let's talk about websites. For Turner's marketing department, no big deal. If you're a freelancer or a 4-person shop, that's a lot of work to get 200 people to kind of raise their hand and talk. In all honesty, the 5 to 10% break there, that's probably pretty optimistic that half the people you talk to are actually going to be potential clients. And if you're really focused, really kind of narrow target marketed, that's realistic. If you're kind of a general web developer, it's actually probably kind of optimistic that half the people you talk to will actually be sort of in your range to do work with. Okay. So how do we do that? How do we get people to raise their hand for help? So this is also kind of, when you hear the term lead gen or prospecting, that's what we're talking about. No more math, I promise. This is just a mnemonic device that I found somewhere online years ago. So to figure out how to organize the things we're going to do to get people to raise their hand that can help us. So basically, the number one is things you do daily, right? So someone hits your web form, you're always going to call them back every day, right? If you're into social media, you got a Twitter following and can generate some interest there, you might make sure you're updating Twitter or Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever, Instagram on a daily basis to keep your audience engaged. So they'll get back to you. If you're into the RFP business in the world, then you're going to review RFPs every day too. Things you might do weekly, write a blog post, maybe take an evergreen post and renew it and publicize it. Probably half of us get Media Currents and Lullabot's weekly email newsletter, right? ProMat has one too, by the way. Things you do monthly, right? Meetups, Drupal meetups, other meetups around town, 4 times a year, maybe camps. Maybe you publish a new case study or, white papers twice a year. It's just totally, up to your imagination. Anyone do anything kind of in their current job or have done stuff in the past that would fit into here that's not on the list? One that came up in Baltimore was contribute back to Drupal. The state of Georgia had an RFP out earlier this year that had 2 minimum requirements. It was like, if you can't check these 2 boxes, don't waste your time proposing. You're not going to win. And one of them was demonstrate with code samples, modules, etc., a very serious commitment to Drupal community.
So it seems like your model right now is a little bit inbound driven. So there's a couple things I do because we're more outbound focused. So pure cold outreach. There's some of that every day, but you want to talk about low percentage of connect to actual conversation. It's like 2 or 3%. And then asking for intros from people I know. When you meet people at a conference or whatnot, if you don't make an effort to build the relationship and then to get on the phone, email, social media, whatever with them once every 4 to 6 weeks, they're going to forget who you are. So you got to be not just talking to them, but also adding value, because you don't want to be the guy who every time you call somebody like, hey, could you introduce me to Joe? Could you introduce me to Mike?
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to just repeat that because the ambient mic won't pick it up. It's just the only mic in the room. 2 other things you can do: outbound, basically cold calling. Absolutely, I have made millions and millions of cold calls, and my hit rate's probably less than 1%. But it's there, and kind of cold calling these days is really more cold emailing most of the time because no one answers the phone if they don't recognize the number. And then also the follow-up on this kind of thing. You talk to someone in the hallway, even if they're not the VP of marketing, they're 22-year-old web developer. Again, follow up with them. Hey, who actually runs the project? Can you send an email and introduce me and get a conversation going? And you might have to do that 2 or 3 times before it actually happens. And then keep that cycle up, absolutely.
So the interesting problem I have is that my pipeline is so full right now that doing lead gen would actually be kind of baiting people for, hey, well, I'm not really available to help you, but let me talk to you about what I do anyway.
It's a good problem to have, the pipeline being, but
That's a good lead gen.
it never actually stays that full, right? That's been the bane of my career is heads down, make phone calls, do proposals. The pipeline goes up like this. Then you make the short list on 4 of them, and you spend 2 weeks getting pitches ready and coordinating with your CTO and your director of creative or whatever. Yeah, really? Let me get this fixed. Right, and so for like a month then you don't do any proposals because you're working on those deals, and suddenly you win 1 of the 3. And you look at your pipeline, now it's back down here again, and head back down. Yeah, and actually kind of find that balance where you're feeding just enough in to make sure you're busy enough without overextending yourself and not being under feeding it in and ending up with no work. Yeah, it's the magic number I don't think anyone really knows the answer to. Because I haven't figured it out yet. Point again, there's really no right answer. If you seem to do really well as a camp speaker, maybe you just 12 times a year you're at camps and that's pretty much all you do and it keeps you busy. It's awesome. There's no right answer. If you're one of those weirdos that likes cold calling and you want to make 50 calls a day and then you can get 2 or 3 good leads a week out of it, it's a perfectly legitimate way to do in business. And actually, to prove that this is not all just theoretical, this is an actual sales plan I did for a startup called NXC North America, which was an offshoring firm based in Switzerland somewhere, I think. Back in 2013 when they hired me to be their salesperson, and they got out of the web business a year later and I moved on. But it will look remarkably like what we just talked about. direct, LinkedIn. There's direct, say 10 new companies per day. I was doing some cold calling. Daily, weekly, so forth. So, I mean, this is not theoretical stuff. This is actually how I got them about $500,000 of business for a company that was 2 people in the U.S. And a bunch of developers overseas. Yeah, because they were in Switzerland. So I was like, if we do good, then I want a ski trip to Zurich. Or Geneva is where they were, I think, Geneva. But again, they ended up kind of pivoting into some other business like healthcare, big data, and analytics or something, and I moved on. Okay. We're doing on time. 1:17, okay. So, you've got these people calling you. You got to you call them back, have the first conversation. Most of those leads are going to be worthless in most cases. Again, if you're like super hyper focused, you're like the web Drupal shop for community colleges and everyone knows it, then you might have a much better rate here because a community college is almost automatic because they know how much, they know who you are, they know you're expensive or whatever. And that conversation starting kind of farther down the road than like just someone who Googled Atlanta Drupal help and found your website. So there's an acronym for this, BANT. Anyone familiar with the BANT acronym? You probably are, yeah. It's basically the 4 things you need to get out of that first conversation to decide if this is someone I can actually sell services to. Budget's obvious, right? You got to try to figure out if they can afford you. Authority. It's very possible oftentimes you're talking to the assistant associate social media director who's 23 years old, and that's fine as long as you understand how you get from him or her to the VP of marketing. As long as they've asked me to make these calls, set up some meetings, that's cool. You can kind of start down the road with someone who's not going to be able to sign a check. But don't be talking to that person 2 months later because you're not going to make that sale. You got to kind of get into the decision, team pretty quick. Just sort of understand what that road is. If you're not on that road, you don't have a qualified prospect. Need. Do they actually need what you're selling? We've been getting ProMet somewhat steady stream of tiny businesses. There was one a couple months ago. It was literally like Joe's Auto Shop from somewhere, I think in North Carolina. He had a perfectly fine 6-page Drupal 7 static site that some freelancer built for him in 2012, I think. His hours, picture of the shop. Nothing wrong with it. Probably all this guy ever needs for a website in his life. But that freelancer had vanished. He didn't know how to update it. And he'd been seeing news about security and wanted to know if he should upgrade to Drupal 8. And I said, no, you should probably go to Squarespace or Wix. I said, you don't need Drupal. Honestly, you don't need WordPress for that site if you're never going to update it. Literally, he updated like twice a year when he changed his hours for the winter. Then went back for summer hours. I'm like, just Squarespace, $10 a month. Find a freelancer that'll knock it out on the weekend for you and be done. You don't need me. You don't need Drupal. Interestingly, I have found that technical and creative founders are not good at this step because, first of all, I think a lot of them still remember those days when they were working off their kitchen table and they'd take that $500 project like that because it was, going to cover half the groceries next month. And now they've got 10 people working for them. You're probably not doing that kind of work. But that optimism that I can figure out how to help this person, and maybe, just maybe, this person is going to be the next Goodyear, at the auto shop, is there because everyone's got one client like that you did a $400 little update for them, and somehow or another, 6 years later, they spent $500,000 with you. But the reality is 99 other people that you had that conversation with never spent a dime with you. You can't that can't be the basis of your strategy is take that work and hope that that's the 1 in 100. Again, if you're a one-person freelancer, maybe that's fine. That's good work for you. But for any kind of company, you're probably not doing that work anymore. And then timing. Timing is important too. I mean, because even if say I don't know, Turner calls you, right? And they've got $500,000 budget. They need a Drupal 8 multi-site, multilingual e-commerce site. And it's got to launch December 1st. You probably don't really have a prospect there either, even though they got money, because it's not happening in 2 weeks. So make sure the timing also makes sense. And when you can kind of check those 4 boxes as all kind of what you're looking for as a company, now you've actually got a qualified prospect to have a conversation with about how you can help them solve their problems. So what happens now? Now we've got someone who's got money, got budget, got a project. How do we help them? Okay. That would totally be like a 5-day seminar in sales to actually answer that question. So I'm really not going to try too much other than some high-level tips to kind of go through how you do that. But I will point you to some good resources if you really want to like read a book, kind of understand how to run that conversation and that process. There's literally probably tens of thousands of sales books on Amazon. And I wasn't kidding when I said every sales consultant does this. They take Sales 101, which we all kind of have the same thing, and they rename the steps, and they write a book, and they go on the consulting circuit. But they're all kind of saying the same thing, and I'll kind of point you back to the originals. My experience has been CTO types, creative types. They're actually pretty good at this. Sit them down with somebody who's got a real business problem and money, and they can have that conversation. Let's go about the project and close the deal. As long as they don't spend too much time wasting it on the unqualified prospects. A couple things to remember: we're not selling Drupal ever, right? Once in a while you get into a really technical sales where they really want you to compare Drupal versus Sitecore or whatever. But 99% of the time you're solving a revenue problem with sales, or you're solving an HR problem with recruiting or something like that. You're not. Most of the time, honestly, most of my clients, they don't care. Honestly, that it's Drupal. It works. Drupal's okay because they've heard about it and they know they can get support on it. They really don't care. They just need something. They just need a solution to a problem. And one thing I always try to remember, there's a tendency, especially if you're maybe in a kind of a big sale type situation, to be a little conservative on the first meeting. You don't want to blow it. Don't. You'll never get a second meeting, right? You get one shot to kind of wow them. So, go in there guns blazing. You got a wacky idea for the website? Go with it. If that wacky idea disqualifies you, you probably never had a shot anyway. Honestly, take that approach. So, a few sales books I like, and I'll actually kind of go a little more detail on what some of these mean. How to Win Friends and Influence People. Who's read that? It's like the old classic from the 30s, I think. Dale Carnegie. Spawned an industry. Some might call it a cult. But honestly, every sales book you read, you can pretty much reduce it back to everyone's favorite subject is themselves, and keep people talking about themselves and their problem, and they think you're a great conversationalist and you're well on the way to being the one to solve their problem. I mean, it sounds simple, and honestly, it kind of is that simple. This was the one that I read as a young 24-year-old bright-eyed technology salesperson back in sometime in the past. Spin selling. What these guys did is they went off back in the late 80s and tagged along with like thousands of sales calls with like Xerox, IBM, sort of, those big industrial type companies back then, and tried to figure out, why did certain sales reps always win the big sale and why did other reps never win the big sale? What they came up with was it's all about the questions you ask. And they broke up the questions into four pieces, basically situational questions. Who built your current website? Where is it hosted, right? You're just trying to get your head around the situation. And the reality is, in 2018, you probably don't ask many of those questions because that's all available on their website. You know who owns them, their finances, all that stuff. And then obviously questions, classic questions 101, trying to get at the problem. So what's the problem with your website? Why isn't it operating right? Is your hosting working for you or not? So forth. And what they figured out was sort of, if you're selling like copiers or something simple, you can stop after the problem. Once you understand the problem, your copier's old and doesn't work, you can sell a new copier, you're done. But for selling complex, IT solutions, you lose if you stop there. You've got to get into the implication. Okay, fine. Your web hosting isn't performing well. What's that really mean? You're 90% of your shopping carts are being abandoned. What's that mean? Well, if each shopping cart could be worth $10,000, you don't need much of an improvement in shopping cart, right? Close rates there to justify a really expensive project rebuilding a website. So that's kind of where you go from small sales to like big sales, is really honing in on making sure the client understands the implication of what their problem is. And the need payoff is basically getting the customer to tell that to you. When the customer says, yeah, if we can improve our shopping cart situation by 5%, we're golden. You've just made the sale at that point, basically, or somebody has. And another sort of concept from spin selling that I still keep in my head all the time is there's basically four things that happen on any sales call. You lose. It's a hold. Nothing kind of changes, which is bad. You advance towards the sale. They agree your situation's great. Come in and meet the VP of marketing or whatever, or you get the win. And And that basically, if you walk out of any sales meeting without advancing or winning, you're losing. So then some guys came along in the late 2000s. And this is sort of, if you go to any kind of corporate sales job now, this is the book the VP of sales is going to tell you to read. It's kind of the hot one. Challenger sale. And it's kind of the same thing. A couple of consultants went out on 18,000 phone sales calls or whatever, but instead of focusing on the questions, they focused on the salespeople and tried to figure out, what makes a good salesperson. And they basically broke salespeople down into these 5 categories, and they're kind of self-explanatory. Relationship builders. It's your classic guy, person that sells by being likable. Everybody which is honestly, if you're selling commodities, that's perfect. Because if you're selling corn, right, you can buy anybody's silo of corn. It doesn't matter. You'll buy from the person you like. It's all the same price. It's commodity. Hard workers, that's the, nose to the grindstone person that's not actually that good, but just makes up for it in effort and ends up winning every year and making his quota. The kind of lone wolf salesperson that doesn't want anyone to talk to his customers and all that kind of stuff. The reactive problem solver, which sometimes I feel like that might be me when I don't want it to be, which is your counter always on fire. You're always solving a crisis. You always solve the crisis, but you spend too much time solving crises. And then the challenger, which is the winner in their book, which is the person that gets the customer to, by questions you ask, thinking sort of bigger picture than the website. It's sort of like spin again, right? Get them out of the narrow silo of this problem. Our hosting sucks, that's if we're selling hosting, and get them thinking bigger picture about what better hosting would do for them. So it's, in a lot of ways, they sort of just are validating the spin model, but they're doing it at sort of a personal level versus a skill level. For a 4-person agency or a freelancer, Snap Selling is the one you probably want to read. It's much more of a sort of a full system of how to do sales for an individual person. And this was written 2013, 2014. This is when it actually recognizes things like email exist. And really, it's Jill Conrath is the author. And really, her whole thing is, the VP of sales, the VP of marketing you're trying to get to has got 400 unread emails. He's got 13 hours of meetings scheduled today. He's only, 9 hours. Plus, he's trying to get to his kid's Little League game. Everyone's overworked. Everyone's got too much to do. How do you cut through that noise to get someone's attention? And that's sort of what the whole her whole model is with her acronym there is keep it simple. Make sure whatever you're offering is basically invaluable to the customer, so they need you. Make sure if you're pitching hosting, that's really your customer's biggest problem because everyone's so busy they don't have time to focus on more than one big problem. So if they're worried about e-commerce and you're in there pitching, a UX design for the intranet, you're losing. And then make sure, again, you're aligned with your customer's priorities. The key thing I always think about this, I thought her really big insight was these 3 decisions everybody makes when you're trying to sell to them. Number 1, they have to decide they're going to talk to you. But they got to decide you're worthy of even a 20-minute conversation. They got to allow access, right? So you get the access, then they have to decide to initiate change. And as we all know, the fact that we convince a client they need a new website doesn't mean they're building a website anytime soon, right? And those projects sometimes will be 2 years before they do anything. So you have to get them from initiate change to actually doing something if you're ever actually going to sell the project to them. And again, it's sort of the only book in the list I gave you that really kind of gives you a system if you're like a freelancer and needs to figure out how to bring more business in. This is the one that kind of gives you do this, do this, do this, do this. And then bonus book that I didn't actually put in the list, but Why Is Your Name Upside Down? It's by David Oakley from Boone Oakley Advertising in Charlotte. They're sort of famous for doing some really wacky campaigns. But a quote that I read in his book that I've never forgotten is live music always beats PowerPoint. But I have not yet had the guts to walk into a sales meeting with my ukulele. But I am going to do it someday. I swear, I'm going to do it. And actually, the earlier quote about you never get a second chance, a second meeting, that's actually him too. Talking about, again, going with your best, brightest, and wackiest ideas and just go for it. Don't play it safe because everybody else is playing it safe. It's just, but advertising obviously is all about selling. And then he's talking about selling the service of advertising to companies. So even though it's not really a sales book, it's more of a kind of a minor biography of him. It's really, there's a lot of sales insight into it. And it's also just hilarious in places. And again, another sales trope. You cannot do a sales presentation without referencing Glengarry Glen Ross, the movie. Who's seen it? Salespeople all claim this is their favorite movie. I don't know why. I watched this movie and I hate myself for my career at the end of it, because I mean these guys are all miserable. They're all alcoholics, right? It's like it's not a happy movie at all. But honestly, always be closing is actually not great advice, because you can totally blow a deal by closing. We've all like dealt with the car salesperson that's trying to like get the contract signed after a 5-minute test drive, and you want to go look at 4 more cars, and you at that point decide, you know what, I am not buying this Ford just to spite this guy. We've all done that, right? That's what happens when you try to close too soon. And it happens in enterprise sales too.
It goes the other way too. I practically had to step on a guy's foot in a meeting one time, because there's this magic moment that happens where you can see the deal is closed.
Yep.
All you gotta do is get the paper in front of them, but the way enterprise sales is structured, you usually can't like whip out a contract right there. So basically what we need to do is make them feel good about themselves for the next 15 minutes, and I could not get this guy to stop selling. I'm like,
Yep. Yeah, that's a very good point. Repeat it here. The opposite works here too. You can, you got to understand when you've sold the deal and then shut up. Because let's face it, at the point you've sold the deal, all you can do if you keep talking is unsell at that point, right? Nothing more good. You've won. Nothing more good can happen if you keep trying to sell, other than maybe you say something they hadn't thought of and you undo your sale. So yeah, absolutely. You got to kind of, when they start asking for things like, okay, how long will this take? What's your contract process like? When you hear those kind of questions, those are buying signals. That's the customer telling you, I am ready to buy from you. Stop pitching features. Give me a contract. So what about RFPs? When I talk to other salespeople, 90% of them absolutely hate RFPs. I have sold millions of dollars of Drupal in the last few years from RFPs. I don't know if I have a magic secret. Maybe just no one else does them. I do. I don't know. But I mean, here's kind of some good points about them, right? They're basically ban approved. You get an RFP from a government agency. The budget may not be in there, but they've got buying authority because they couldn't issue the RFP if someone hadn't signed off on doing this. They're generally pretty explicit about their needs in the RFP, plus you can ask more questions. And there's usually very explicit timing in it too. We want this site launched July 31st or whatever the case may be. Private sector, if Georgia Pacific, you wake up one morning and find a Georgia Pacific RFP in your inbox, should you pursue it? Probably not. You should ask some questions, but corporate America doesn't buy that way. When corporate America sends out blind RFPs, they've already decided who's going to get the project, but they need 3 competing bids so they can give it to the purchasing agent and say, see, we looked, my cousin's web shop really is the best one here. So I mean, literally, when you get private sector ones, I'll ask some questions, but I kind of assume this is a waste of my time. Government, maybe. You really have to qualify for relevance there. And what I mean relevance is, if you've done 13 Drupal websites for community colleges and you get an RFP from Gwinnett Tech, yes, you're 100% on that like flies on honey, because it's right in your sweet spot. You're completely relevant to the customer. But what if you've never done a community college website and you get an RFP from Gwinnett Tech? It's just because you're a local vendor and they found you on a list somewhere. Is that a good lead? I would say it's a maybe. If they're asking for Drupal, yes, because now you've got relevance. It's uphill battle because there's going to be plenty of Drupal shops that have got some college experience that are going to look better on paper than you, but you've got a chance. If it's like most college RFPs where they don't care what they don't care if it's proprietary, they don't care if it's open source, they just want a CMS, no. Because you're going to lose to someone who's special. You're going to lose Omni Update, quite frankly, in that situation. But you're going to lose to someone who specializes in college, either proprietary or open source, because all those being equal, price-wise, skill-wise, they've got 8 client references from colleges saying these guys are good. You don't have that. So how do you break into a new market then? This actually is, I'm not going off script. I just thought about this. How do you break into a new market if you don't have that experience? I don't have an answer, by the way. I'm hoping you guys do. I'm hoping you guys do.
What's worked for us in 2 or 3 of the last places I've been is you have to do one of 2 things. You have to find an opportunity that is very relevant by technology or something where you've got a clear lead and you can win based on the strengths of that. Or you find like a specialist agency and partner up with them who doesn't do what you do, Ideally a non-technical vendor entirely who's like a design agency, but they've got some higher ed creds, to use your example.
Yep.
You go in, you sub through them, or you partner up with them side by side, and you get a couple of wins that way, and then you start having some relevance.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I'll repeat that just for the mic. If you don't sort of have, if you want to do, let's just say higher ed, you want to do higher ed, you don't have the skills. You either got to find someone looking for Drupal, because that'll sort of, again, that gives you a foot in the door. It's a bigger hill because you're still going to be fighting people that have Drupal in higher ed, but you got a shot. Or you get like a design firm or an SEO firm or something you don't do that's part of the project and partner up with them, and they've got 7 higher ed clients. You can sort of piggyback on that first project to get some experience in the field. It's tough though. At a previous agency, well, at the NXC's market was tourism. They did a lot of tourism sites. So when I left them and went to another agency, my first Drupal shop, I said, hey, I've just been doing some tourism sites. Tourism market is like 3 or 4 horrible proprietary CMSs. They lock them into 3-year contracts. They all look the same. This is a market ripe for open source disruption. Let's do it. And 2 years later, I had sold 0 websites to tourism. It's just, I kept getting us to the short list. We could get to the short list on price, on just general creative work, but every single time it was, we like you guys, but these guys have done the websites for Myrtle Beach, Panama City Beach, Miami Beach, and whatever. And honestly, we finally gave up. Like, we're not going to break into tourism this way. And I even had a consultant who had some really great cred that I knew from my previous job it said, just don't meet all your proposals. We'll figure out, and I'll do some strategy work for you, but feel free to use me and my clients. And still, couldn't overcome here's 20 beaches I've already done. You haven't done any beaches. So it's tough. And again, be choosy, because, your average government RFP is 16 hours of work to respond to. It's not more. If it's federal government, block out a week. So,
A bit of that as well is, how big do you want to be? Or how big can you be?
Yeah.
Because those guys will suck you dry in a hurry.
That's true.
And make sure you have the resources to actually fulfill that.
It's a good point. I'll repeat again here. It's not that it's a bad problem to have, but you can be a 5-person agency and find yourself with a $500,000 federal contract on your hands. It happens. Can you fulfill it? It's dangerous with government, because if you fail at government, you can literally get blacklisted and not do government work for 3 to 5 years. Now, obviously, if you irritate a private sector client because you can't fulfill, you lose that client. Can't use them as a reference, but that's survivable. But Department of Commerce put you on the blacklist. You're not doing government work for 3 to 5 years. And even a lot of private sector companies will ask in RFPs and ask in the procurement process, have you ever been basically blacklisted from government work? So, high risk, high reward, I guess. All right, so nearing the end here, probably dating myself on the reference. Who remembers the episode? George is unemployed, and he's given the unemployment office Jerry's phone number as Vandalay Industries. He sells latex, so he can claim he's looking for a job. So anyway, just a couple of thoughts about, if you are like a 4 to 10, 20 person agency, thinking about hiring somebody to do sales full time, because you kind of got to the point where you can't be the CTO / developer founder / biz dev person by yourself. Just a couple of thoughts about it from my experience. First of all, we're not cheap. Just like good devs are not cheap. Good salespeople aren't cheap either. Think about if you want, sorry for the really lame use of the term full stack here. I couldn't think of a better way to put it that was relevant to like technology. But, if you want somebody who, has like basic technical skills and can have a conversation and use the term content type in context properly, versus someone who's just going to like crank out a bunch of calls and get people interested and then you take over. It's, 2 totally legitimate ways to do it, right? You might just have a young person cranking out 50 calls and emails a day, and every time someone kind of raises their hand, then you jump in and take over. So they're like a pure lead gen person. That's fine. That person's going to be relatively cheap. Versus, someone old grizzled person like me that can can basically take it all the way to closing a complex technical deal and not really need a lot of help, because you can have those kind of technical conversations at a certain level. Obviously, that full stack person is a lot more expensive, but they take less of your time. So you gotta, as the founder or leader, kind of weigh how you want to handle that. If your comp plan can't be explained in one slide, redo it until it can. Seriously, no salesperson wants like, okay, when I'm 102% of quota, I now get a 1.25 bonus, and then when I get 108% quota, just keep it simple, really. If you can't do it in a slide, you can't calculate it in a simple 2-column spreadsheet, you're overthinking the comp plan. Salespeople aren't that complicated, really. Just give us some money and show us how the money comes in, and we're happy. We don't need complexity. Plan ahead. We all know how long it takes to close a 6-figure Drupal project, right? If you're sitting here thinking, I don't know how I'm going to pay the rent in January, it's too late to hire someone to get sales because they're not going to close anything quick enough to help you. If you're bringing somebody in kind of cold, you've got like your 8 kind of key accounts, and you're going to grow the company by bringing your first salesperson in, and they're going to just kind of be on their own, go out and find business. Basically, you probably should budget for paying them for 6 months before they bring any revenue in. They should hit revenue in month 4, I would say, if they're good. But things happen. You can get to the final 2 on 3 deals, and everything's great, and you just it's your bad month, and you don't win one of the 3. So I would say if I was the CEO hiring like my first salesperson, I'd want to know I can pay them for 6 months. You might decide they're not working out and fire them in 60 days because they're not, they sold you, but they're not really doing the job, and that's a different argument. I'm saying someone who's actually good, going to work out, but sometimes the start can be slow just because of the market or just the deals you're chasing or whatever. So to have that much sort of budgeted. I bring this up because of a certain agency I won't name that hired me 2-3 years ago, and we had this conversation, and he was borrowing personal funds for payroll in 45 days. Even though we had and he was, most of you know this person, by the way, I'm almost sure. He knew better, but his agency wasn't doing well and didn't logically think that I'm not going to come in a month and generate 100K revenue my first month. That job lasted like 55 days.
I would tweak your wording on that
Okay.
just a little bit. You're not going to get to ROI in 6 months. I think you're going to get to cash flow neutral in 6 months.
You're right. You're going to have, I will have sold enough to justify my existence in 6 months. Let's put it that way. If you paid me at that point, say 50K, I should have easily sold more than that by month 4.
But if
But you might not have collected it yet. As an agent, as a CEO, you may not have collected it yet because, as we all know, these projects take a year sometimes for all the money to come in too. But, I guess I should say within 6 months, you should feel very confident you're making money on the person you hired, even if maybe it's not on the bank yet, just because of the sales cycles. And when I started looking back at like all my comp plans in the last 4 or 5 jobs, and when you add up base commission, 401k contribution, health insurance contributions, all that stuff, it pretty much is always sort of 12, 14, 15 to 20% of what I'm selling. It's sort of where the number ends up. If there's more of my income as a salesperson at risk, like the base is lower and the commission percentage is higher, I'm going to want to see that sort of number be closer to 20. If you're paying me a higher base, I'm comfortable as a salesperson with that number 15, maybe even down to 12. Just sort of risk reward, right? If I got more income at risk, I'm going to want to see a higher reward in the back end. I know of an agency that decided they were tired of commission and they're paying their sales force 6-figure base salaries with no commission at all. The point I made to that CEO was, well, they know what you're going to get. You're going to get salespeople that are happy making $100,000 a year and not try to get more. But it's working for them. So again, if you hire the right people, I think it'll work. That's tough. They're going through a lot of salespeople in that company right now. Actually, it's one I used to work for. So. And standing ovation. Questions, comments, criticisms. Keeping in mind, he's very good friends with my boss.
So I think one thing I would tweak a little bit, and again, this may be a difference in our sales process versus your sales process and who our ideal account profile is and so on. We spend a lot more time on the up ahead of the opportunity, trying to generate the initial contact and have the initial discovery meeting, find out if the revenue size is there, if the way they like to work with people works the way we do, and then put that into sort of a nurture cycle to identify later on opportunities. But some of that is that RFP aversion.
Right.
I want to have the conversation with them before they've already structured, here's what we want to buy, because I don't like playing in somebody else's box that may be shaped up much better for one of my competitors than it would for me.
Yeah, I totally agree, by the way. The person I was thinking of when I did this was like the CEO of a 4-person shop who, quite frankly, didn't have time. Right. You know, they're just he's doing sales 25% of the time, developing 30% of the time, invoicing at 2 a.m, you know, or a freelancer trying to get a pipeline going. Which, again, I totally agree. To the extent you can get those conversations going ahead of the RFP cycle, you're way ahead of the game. I would personally be thrilled if I was too busy to answer RFPs, honestly. I'd be thrilled if I had enough, you know, if our marketing process generated enough business, I could just look at an RFP and go, who cares? I got a meeting tomorrow with whoever, you know. But that's a pretty serious investment in marketing, and you know, then you're getting into Pardot and lead scoring and drip campaigns and a lot of marketing stuff. That's a whole separate presentation. Maybe that'll be next year when I do. Yes, I thought a hand back there. Oh, I'll give you the presentation. So I can just boom, 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 boom. There.
I bought the Snap film.
Yeah, that's actually a good one.
So what's your advice for, I mean, you were saying that your primary target for this is the guy who's at a small shop
Right.
and he's having to do it all, or lady who's having to do it all. How have you found it possible for those people to have the discipline to set aside time? Say, because I've lived at agencies, even big agencies that have gone on that seesaw of, okay, we just sold more stuff than we can possibly do. Everybody's working 70 hours a week. And then 6 months later, you're like, what do you mean nobody sold anything? And now it's, okay, everybody's selling and your revenue goes too.
I mean, I think the top dog, you know, him or her, has got a, I guess it comes down to, are you a sales-driven organization? Someone at the top has sort of always got to keep that focus. What's the pipeline look like? Look at it every week and recognize, hey, we've done 2 proposals in the last month. That's going to bite us in the rear in 4 months. You know, again, whether it's you're going to kick your salesperson in the butt or it's because you don't have a salesperson. And, you know, again, the CEO's got to decide, okay, I got to, you know, buckle down, go back to all our existing clients next week and try to stir up some business. Just, again, make sure you see that before it's 45 days out, because then it's too late.
I've been trying to transition. I'm in that 4 or 5 person shop where the CEO is doing everything. And over just about a year ago, I realized that my growth up to this point has been kind of organic, word of mouth. And I really, if I want to get where I want to be, I have to become a salesman. And so I've really been trying to learn the discipline, reading books and things like that. But I was wondering, it seems like what I've been thinking about, I have a full pipeline. I use Pipe Drive, which I love. And it's been very helpful to show the funnel. But it's like what I was thinking was, if I could have some help earlier in the process that brings them along, you know, because for me to call all those people every week, it's a lot. I mean, I'm trying to do it even when I don't want to do it. But what about having somebody on the front end that's maybe doing the lead generation and qualification and getting them to a point where I'm only talking to the ones that are in the 20.
Yeah, totally. I mean, you totally could hire, and that's the case where you could hire a younger, less expensive person, quite frankly, whose job is to, you know, again, make 50 phone calls a day or 50, you know, some emails, update Twitter 4 times a day, keep LinkedIn booming, whatever. And then basically knows enough to have that first conversation, sort of qualify them, and then set up a meeting for you to kind of work with their product. A totally legitimate way to do that. It's, you know, there's that model, you know, kind of younger, less experienced person finding leads, and then you kind of drive the business, or the other way where you can have an experienced person sort of just bring it in for you, or, you know, obviously there's variations in between. But yeah, definitely having a less experienced person sort of just beating the bushes for you and bringing and finding the leads that you can then work. Totally legitimate approach to it. And that was totally my job when I was younger several times too. So my first web agency, the one in here in Atlanta, was founded by a stockbroker investment guy. So there was like 8 of us doing 200 phone calls a day. Classic stockbroker model, you know, just smile and dial. Got us to an IPO. Didn't get much beyond it though, unfortunately. The same thing, right? You can do that. We could do that and win some website deals. Yeah. We couldn't do that. We really failed at account management as a company, I think, back then. You know, we were good at all that kind of, you know, pounding the phone stuff, but we weren't we were getting big clients and weren't turning them into $1 million clients. When I look back at it, that's where that company failed bad. That and also the venture capitalist went to jail for stock price manipulation, which didn't help. Yes. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I mean, this was totally about new business. Absolutely. You know, I think at the very beginning I mentioned this is like, assume you're trying to get $500,000 from new clients. And the reality, if you wanted $500,000 next year, you'd probably be counting at least half of that from your existing clients, right? That's account management. It's a whole nother presentation, quite frankly. But yeah, obviously you got to have somebody salesy enough to recognize new opportunities in the account, but also technical enough to actually be like a useful resource to them and not just be every time they talk to you, you're trying to sell them something, but someone who can have that kind of strategic conversation about, hey, maybe this Drupal isn't your answer here, or maybe this is a great opportunity to look at decoupled, right? That's how you're going to build that first six-figure website into $1 million client, is those conversations. And it's just a matter of having the right people on staff, whether, again, it's the salesperson or whether you've got somebody else who sort of manages the account after sales closes it. They can have those conversations and recognize where the opportunities are.
Our model is interesting in that, 600 person firm, right. But as an architect, I have a sales target. And so that's either new business, I get extra stuff if it's new business, if it's follow-on business. I mean, and the point is, like, as you're thinking about the architecture, where are the places where you're going to be adding on, right. And then having that technical relationship to say, this is the logical place to sign up.
I would call that a sales-driven organization. Like the company culture basically is everybody, even the dev architects here, are responsible for bringing in money. Yeah, that'd be, as a salesperson, that'd be a great place to work. You get all the help. You get all that help. You didn't hear that, Johnny.
You either.
I think they're going to kick us out here in a minute, so yeah. I should bail out so the next person can get ready. Thank you. I'm around the whole show if you have questions.